I think it's time to talk a little bit about the SEC because Chris, we've been on the same page with this. Like
The
the
SEC
SEC
sucks. That's
has,
what we've been saying.
yeah, we've been saying it all year. It's like, listen, yeah, big picture, the SEC is still probably the best league. Recruiting rankings don't lie. NFL
Yep.
draft results don't lie. It has the most talent. They have the best programs. We get all that. But if you watch the games this year, which I think a lot of fans just don't, like Chris, you and I watch everything. I think a lot of SEC fans don't watch the Big Ten. They don't watch Notre Dame. I think it's true. The Big Ten fans a lot of times don't watch the SEC, don't watch a lot of the other stuff. We watch everything. The SEC was not the best league this year, and we've been saying it all year long. These teams at the top, even the teams at the bottom, were not great. And you don't lose, Alabama doesn't lose to Vanderbilt and Michigan by accident. Georgia doesn't struggle with Kentucky, who won one SEC game by accident. Ole Miss doesn't lose to Kentucky by accident. Like, these things happen because they're not great. If beating average teams was so easy, more teams would do it. But you know who did it all season long? Penn State and Oregon and mostly Ohio State until they played Michigan.
To be fair, Georgia was the one SEC team that did as well.
Yes, I know, but that's my point, is that everyone else around them did not. And it was because they weren't great teams. And I think that this is why when we started talking about, hey, we got to get Alabama, we got to get South Carolina, we got to get Ole Miss in the playoff, Indiana, SMU, these teams are jokes. Like, no, they're not. And those other teams, people just assume are better, and they're not. We'll see what Ole Miss is when they play Duke tonight. I don't want to take too much away from bowl games, which are sort of, not exactly gospel. But
Lane's going to try to put up 100 in this game after the whole Alabama lost and all these teams that are losing. He's going to try to make sure that doesn't happen. If you're
Lane's
listening
been
to
sending
this
some weird tweets, by the way.
if you're listening to this after that game, I'm glad I was right or upset that I was wrong. We don't know how that went. But so last year, Pac-12 was the best conference in college football. We all knew that as the season went on. As this season went on, it felt like maybe the Big Ten or the SEC was pretty close. Like, you could make a case.
I thought it was pretty close. The Big Ten, especially at the top, was so much better. I will listen to arguments that the middle of the SEC was better. But I've been told by SEC fans forever, because when the Big 12 was in its heyday, I said a lot, hey, the middle of the Big 12 is a little bit tougher than the SEC some of these years. And I was told that, we got to judge leagues by what's at the top. And if you judge leagues by what's at the top, it's the Big Ten by a mile this year. And so, it is what it is. As for why that's happening, I think it's complicated. How much of that is NIL and collectives, and you can't stockpile talent at Alabama and Georgia like you can. And a lot of those guys are going to be playing for Ole Miss or going to be playing for, Tennessee or Arkansas or whoever, and spread throughout the league because they want to play and make money doing it. I don't know. I think that's a really complicated conversation without a simple answer. But what I do know is that when you look at what Alabama is and what Georgia is, these programs that have been on a complete other plane from the rest of the conference and frankly the rest of the sport for a long time, their sort of slippage pretty much correlates with the rise of collectives and NIL. So, I think that clearly that has to be a factor in a lot of this. But regardless of why, it's clear that it's happened.
And on top of that, remember all the talk coming in, Texas and the SEC not going to go
that too. That's a good point too. We hadn't even got to that.
Who's the only SEC team left in the playoff? It's Texas. Now, Texas was not as good as Georgia. They went 0-2. But Texas handled the SEC otherwise, and they deserve to be in the spot. To that point, I just realized with this loss, my dream of a split national championship is gone.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chris.
I legit thought it was possible that if
Georgia and
Texas met in the national championship for a third time and Texas beat Georgia without Carson Beck, you could make the argument that an AP poll voter could say Georgia should be number one. That's not going to happen anymore. But look, Texas, they didn't play the hardest SEC schedule like Georgia did. But, this is the point, like, it's not as dominant as it was. It doesn't have there's more talent spread out everywhere. Kentucky won one SEC game this year. It was against Ole Miss. Like, that's the whole playoff conversation, which, by the way, technically, Indiana played Notre Dame closer than Georgia did, if you want to go by the final score. I know Indiana scored some garbage time points. That's not necessarily the case. But for all this haranguing of Indiana, demanding they apologize for even being in the college football playoff, from Kirk Herbstreit, from Sean McDonough, who broadcasts this Georgia game. Indiana is owed an apology. SMU is owed an apology after Tennessee got blown out, after Oregon got blown out, after Georgia got handled by Notre Dame here. This is just what happens in college football. And I still think it's ridiculous what happened to Indiana. And I know it's not technically the same thing, but I've seen a lot of Indiana fans gloating in this fact that Indiana scored more points and played closer than Georgia did by the final score. I know the garbage time stuff, but I'm just going to say that. Like, this whole playoff was very weird, and we've got some more games to go.